When Wikipedia launched in 2001, the reaction was mostly a dismissive smile. The idea that millions of strangers, anonymous, unpaid, from every culture and language, would build the world's largest encyclopedia together and keep it honest? Good luck with that. Today, Wikipedia serves 11 billion pages a month, and almost nobody questions it anymore. But here is what is interesting. Wikipedia didn't succeed because people are basically good. It succeeded because someone understood how trust actually works and built the right conditions for it. My guest has spent more than 2 decades thinking about that, about what makes people cooperate across difference, about what breaks trust and what rebuilds it, about why some institutions earn loyalty and others collapse. He has now written a book about it, The 7 Rules of Trust. My guest is Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia. Jimmy, welcome to Trust Talk, and great to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here, yeah.
You call yourself a pathological optimist. You have written 7 rules for building trust at a time when trust is low in many institutions. After everything you have seen on Wikipedia, on the internet, in society, is your optimism earned, or is it a disposition you cannot help?
It's a little bit of both, actually. I do think it's a part of my personality, and it's just how I am. I always think everything's going to be great. Sort of broadly in life, I just have a very positive outlook, and I can't help it. It's just how I am. On the other hand, I also think there's a lot of good reasons for it. People are really wonderful, and we see so many people pouring their hearts into making Wikipedia and making it as good as we can. And people have such passion for all kinds of obscure topics that it's really wonderful to see. And it's something that we should all remember in this age with a lot of conflict and social media outrage and so forth. There's a better way.
The first rule you describe in your book is make it personal. You open that chapter with the night your daughter Kira was born with a life-threatening condition, an unknown doctor, an experimental treatment, a decision that had to be made immediately. You walked through authenticity, empathy, and logic. In that moment, which of the 3 mattered most to you?
I would say in that moment, empathy was really it, but it was an interesting form of empathy because empathy, we think of a very emotional and kind and caring, and of course that was there. But it was also empathy in the sense that after I asked a few questions, Dr. Bernstein understood who I was or what I was like, and he drew me a graph on a piece of paper, knowing that I would want to understand a little bit about the science behind what he was going to do. And I thought, oh, okay, right. He gets what I need here in this moment to understand and to trust in his medical judgment. So yeah, empathy, but empathy with logic in this case.
Your 4th rule is give to get. The Quakers built entire industries on extending trust first before it was earned. Honest prices, no bargaining, and it worked. But Wikipedia scaled that to millions of anonymous strangers. At what point did assume good faith start to feel like a viable strategy rather than a naive one?
It was very early on. I'm not sure when we first said assume good faith, but it was very, very early. It was one of the earliest things. And it was because if people came to us and they were trying to write something, but they weren't doing a good job, it just was practical to say, well, assume that they're trying to do something good, but they just need more information or more training or whatever it might be. And if you try that a few times, you usually find that's actually correct, that most people are trying to do something good in life. And if you assume good faith rather than assume bad faith, you get a lot further with people.
Your 5th rule is be civil. You write about an online forum called Change My View, where almost 4 million anonymous strangers discussed the most sensitive topics imaginable, like abortion, religion, addiction, without insults, without outrage, and occasionally one of them actually changes their mind. Wikipedia works the same way. Why does civil conversation feel so rare online, yet these examples prove it's possible?
I think that the reason civil conversation seems so rare online and is so rare online is that a lot of the places online are not designed to foster healthy communication and healthy discourse, that instead they're designed for engagement, keeping people on the site as long as possible. And it turns out outrage and anger does tend to keep people around longer, seeing more ads and so forth. So I think it is a design problem. And I think it's something that we've seen, I would say, recently, and something I'm quite encouraged by, the rise of podcasting and really longer form content, which is very popular with younger people, which I think is very interesting, that young people love long form podcasts. I think it's because they basically are fed up with short form, rage bait nonsense online.
You write that the single most important thing you ever said about Wikipedia was not your grand vision, imagine a world where every person has access to all human knowledge, but the simple sentence, Wikipedia is an encyclopedia. Why was that so powerful, and what does it teach us about how purpose actually works?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the case of Wikipedia, like one of the things that has always been with us is when we're trying to make any decision, and there's all kinds of decisions you have to make every day in any kind of project, that simple idea of an encyclopedia, which everyone understands, everyone knows what an encyclopedia should be and so forth, it really clarifies our decision making. It gives us a purpose. We know what we're doing. And it's actually one of the challenges for social media, for example, is that there often isn't a purpose. The purpose is just to talk, and engagement is the only purpose, really. Whereas with this, it organizes our thinking. It helps us to decide what's allowed and what isn't allowed and all of that. So purpose is good. And of course, this is beyond just Wikipedia. I think all kinds of organizations and businesses need to think about, okay, what are we trying to do here? If you said, oh, I'm going to have a podcast, and the podcast is going to be about, I don't know what, but we'll just talk to interesting people. That's a little harder, but Trust Talk, okay. Yeah, I think I know what this one's about. I think I'm probably a good guest for this podcast. So
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. You tell a deeply uncomfortable story from your hometown of Huntsville, Alabama, a 1904 mob of thousands, highly organized and cooperative, acting on a shared sense of community. You use it to make a point about human nature, that the same instinct to connect and collaborate can produce a lynching or a Wikipedia. What determines which way it goes?
I do think it's the purpose. Having a good purpose really helps. But also, there's other things to consider there. I mean, certainly when mobs are acting in the heat of the moment, then that often produces a bad outcome. Sometimes it can produce a good outcome. In the heat of a moment, the classic example is someone is trapped underneath a car or something, and 8 people lift the car up to get the person out, and they just do it in the moment and very quickly. Well, this is okay, right? This is quick action, a mob doing the right thing, but obviously it can also go very badly. So there is a little bit of a lesson here around stopping to reflect and to think about what is our purpose? Is it a good purpose? But what I wanted to acknowledge in this is that you can be quite naive and say, oh, well, but people are very social and they want to do things together. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But there's a little bit more you have to say, which is let's make sure we're doing the right things together.
Your 6th rule is be independent. You write about Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post pulling its presidential endorsement 2 weeks before the election, and you say Bezos was right on the substance, but catastrophically wrong on the timing. What is the difference between principled independence and the appearance of cowardice?
Yeah, well, I mean, in this case, if after the previous election, at some convenient, quiet time, they had announced, we've decided to change our policy. We want to be perceived as neutral, and we understand that when we make an endorsement, this is the problem with an endorsement, is everything else we do is under question as to whether we're just campaigning for our candidate. And so I think people would respect that. I think that's a sensible thing. But when you do it 2 weeks before the election, it seemed like a political statement instead of the opposite of saying we don't want to make a political statement. So that was clearly a big mistake. And I do think that it is a partly to do with a principle versus an expediency. If you put it into place in a way that says, no, actually, as a matter of principle, we've realized that it's undermining trust when we endorse political candidates, so we're not going to do it. That's very different from what feels like Bezos blocking what would have inevitably been an endorsement of the Democratic candidate.
Your seventh rule is be transparent. You use the Nixon checkers speech as a striking example. In 1952, Richard Nixon was accused of corruption and went on national television to disclose every detail of his personal finances, down to his mortgage and his car. It saved his political career. But Nixon later became the symbol of political deception. What does that tell us about the limits of transparency as a trust strategy?
Certainly, I mean, one of the reasons that we chose Nixon as the example is because it's funny and surprising, because people have forgotten that he saved his career through really straightforward honesty and transparency, and he opened his finances and he bored everyone to tears reading page after page of financial documents. But it doesn't show the limits of the strategy of transparency. Later in life, he wasn't transparent, right? He did the Watergate burglary. He did a lot of secretive things, a cover-up, lied to Congress, all of those kinds of things, which really damaged him and destroyed the trust that he had had earlier in his career. So it's an interesting story because it illustrates the positive impact that trust had in his career, but also the negative impact when he didn't behave in a trustworthy manner.
In the book, you also describe how Airbnb faced a nightmare, a host apartment ransacked, the company's first real trust crisis. They leaned in, disclosed, rebuilt, and came out stronger. Is that a template? Can any institution recover trust if it's willing to be transparent about failure?
I think it's more salvageable than people think. I talked to Frances Fry in the book. She's a leading academic at Harvard who writes on trust, and she actually went into an executive role for a short time at Uber to help them restore trust. And one of the things that she said to me, which I don't think made it into the book, she said, people always say, oh, if you lose trust, that's it, it's over. You can never win it back. But she said, this isn't true, that actually organizations can rebuild trust. They can. And it's pretty straightforward how to do it. Like if they've made a mistake, own the mistake, explain what happened, put into place real genuine measures to change. This is the Airbnb story, is they realized, wow, we have to stop and we have to think about every procedure that we have in terms of when the people are renting the apartments and the hosts and everything to build trust between everyone at every step of the way. And it worked. And so I do think broadly, people can rebuild trust. Now, obviously, it's harder in some contexts and in some places, but for organizations and businesses, I think it's possible many, many times.
In the book, you describe a framework from a Harvard professor you just mentioned, Frances Fry, authenticity, empathy, and logic. She says every time trust breaks down, it traces to one of those three. When did you realize that Wikipedia's challenge was fundamentally a trust problem, not a content or technology problem?
The idea of trust in Wikipedia was not born of any theoretical framework or anything like that. I was just a guy trying to make an encyclopedia. But very early on, I wrote on my user page in Wikipedia, you can edit this page, I trust you. And please do something good with that trust. And that was just my personality. It was just nature to say like, oh, actually, I want to trust people. And somebody pointed out to me, and there's a story in the book about the predecessor to Wikipedia was called Nupedia. And Nupedia had this 7-stage process to get anything published. You had to fax in your CV, fax. That's how old this was when we used fax machines. And somebody pointed out to me recently, after the book came out, they said, oh, so Nupedia was like the 7 rules of mistrust. I said, "Oh, that's great. That's very clever. Yes, I never thought of that." But all the 7 sort of stages of the Newpedia process were really signs to people like, "I don't trust you. I don't trust you." Like, you have to prove everything at every step of the way. And it was a very suspicious process versus Wikipedia, which was a real turnabout, is to say, "No, look, let's trust people. Let's let things flourish. Like, let people get to work. Let trust happen." So I think it was very, very early on, but I didn't, that transformation from, oh, Newpedia doesn't trust people, but Wikipedia should trust people, wasn't conscious in my mind at the time. It was just like, that wasn't working. Let's just have some freedom. Let's play for a while and let's see what we can accomplish.
Oh, well, that's worked out very well, did it?
Yeah, it's done very well, yes.
My last question, Jimmy, is again on Frances Fry. She describes Uber in 2017 as having broken trust with every single stakeholder, riders, drivers, regulators, investors, employees, all at once. She helped turn it around in 9 months. What does that story tell us about how fast trust can be rebuilt and what it actually takes?
Yeah, I think it tells us a lot, and it's an optimistic story. Now, right now, I think if we think about certain politicians, for example, who have trust problems, well, if you think about Donald Trump, I think it would take more than 9 months. I don't think he can regain my trust ever. So I don't want to say you can always do it. But for many politicians or many organizations that have made some mistake or they've done something wrong, I think usually people can be quite forgiving. If you come forward and you say, you know what, yeah, I screwed up. Like, this was not the right thing to do. We made the wrong decision, but we're going to make it right. And we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to take all the steps. I think broadly people will say, oh, okay, well, great. Like, everybody has failed in their life. I think almost everyone has at some point. Everyone's made a mistake in their life and everyone has let people down. These things happen, even if you've got goodwill, even if you're being trustworthy. But we also sometimes are not trustworthy and we recognize later, oh, like, I really shouldn't have done that and that wasn't the right thing to do. Well, if you just carry on being untrustworthy and cover up and lie and so on, it doesn't make things better. But if you just say, okay, hold on, like, I've got to stop. Like, okay, look, I screwed up. I did the wrong thing. I always like to tie this back to parenting because I have teenagers. And for me, one of the things that you need to do with teens is build trust, to extend trust to them. Like, I trust you to do the right thing. And then they don't always, right? They're teenagers. They make mistakes and so forth. But what you want to teach them is say, look, if you've made a mistake, all right, and you've done something that you said you wouldn't do, it's going to be much better if we have an open conversation, right? If you say to me, you know what, I know I'm supposed to put my phone away at night, but I snuck downstairs and I got my phone and I was up at 2 a.m. texting my friends and you caught me and I'm really sorry. Like, don't lie, just like, let's get it right. And then I'm going to be able to forgive. I'm going to say, okay, look, I was a teenager. Of course, you don't always do exactly what you should do, but let's think about how we can make this better in the future. That builds a healthy trust in both directions so that then you can rely on each other and have a healthier way forward. And that's just a simple idea about teenagers. The same thing is obviously very true in business, in politics, in journalism, and everywhere, is to say, like, look, when you've screwed up, okay, that's fine. People will forgive you, but just make it right. Make it right.
Jimmy, thank you for this conversation. Wikipedia is often seen as a miracle of information, but what we really been talking about is a miracle of trust. Thank you for helping us understand how that works and for being on the Trust Talk podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for listening to Trust Talk. Trust is easy to praise, much harder to understand. That's what these conversations are for. Hope to see you back for the next conversation.